Okay, we should be live. Sorry for the delay there. Just getting something sorted, getting this all set up. A little bit of a rush, and I'll wait for a few people to join. Then I'll get started while I set myself up here. Just go on mute for a second. And let me know if you guys can hear me too, because this device I notice isn't very good for recording audio. I'm considering actually plugging my microphone into it so it's a little bit better, because when I listen to something back on here, it doesn't sound as good, you know? Is what it is. Like, my live streams don't sound as good as my videos, put it that way. Shout out to MMA, good to see you here, bro. Every time. Yep, streaming a little bit later than usual tonight. I was off work today, so had nothing to do all day. I had a lot of time on my hands, so I really should have done it earlier, but I checked out that documentary that they just released within the past hour, and yeah, it was quite interesting to me, and I figured I'd give some thoughts on it when a few people join, you know. But yeah, suffice it to say, I thought it was a fairly interesting documentary. It was a lot more interesting than I was expecting. See, I don't usually watch boxing documentaries, because usually I find them to be very scripted, very cliche, and they don't usually tell me anything that I don't already know, and when they do, it's usually just useless information. But that documentary I found very, very eye-opening. I found it very interesting, because one of the things that I'd suspected for a while is that going into that fight, I'm talking about obviously the last one, the Catterall fight, that there was a lot of problems behind the scenes. And I know that fighters say that all the time. You know, they say, you know, when they have a bad performance, they say, I had an injury, or I had problems making the weight, or there was this going on, or lacked motivation. Usually, fighters tell you one thing before a fight. They tell you, I'm feeling great, feeling strong, everything's going well. But then afterwards, it's a different story, isn't it? But what I found interesting about that one in particular is that they basically documented near enough everything. Like, they documented pretty much everything that went on during that training camp. Everything from the injuries to getting absolutely battered in sparring, to problems making the weight. For example, it shows you early in the camp, and he's about two and a bit stone over what he should be. And I just found that really interesting. I don't know if you've seen it, MMA, but yeah, I found it quite interesting personally. And it makes me wonder too, going into the Zepeda fight, how that one's going to look, because it's going to be the same situation, isn't it? In fact, it may be the same situation, but even worse. Which is why, despite the fact that it's been talked about, I haven't made a prediction video for it. What else was it I wanted to talk about? There was One second. There was another situation that kind of spurred me on to do this. Be with you in a minute. One sec. Right, here we go. Yeah, that was it. The Usyk versus AJ rematch. I seen a video from a subscriber of mine, Lee Davis, who makes videos. I don't know if he's here, but he was talking about how AJ has basically signed a new deal with DAZN, which, in my opinion, makes the Usyk fight, the rematch, a lot more interesting because obviously, I mean, look, going into the first fight, I obviously favoured Usyk for the win. I didn't really have, I didn't really have any concerns other than corruption. But what I've heard about this DAZN deal in particular is apparently it's something like £100 million every time Anthony Joshua fights, and presumably they're going to want to get a return on an investment like that. I know that DAZN is kind of known for just throwing money all over the place, but going into that fight, man, I mean, if he loses the first fight in that new deal, that's going to seem like a complete waste of money because who knows if he'll even box again after that. And if he does box again after that, it's definitely not going to be for the world title. I'll tell you that. It's not going to be for that at all, is it? So that's a situation I found quite interesting because obviously, like I said, going into the first fight, I was concerned about corruption because obviously you fight Anthony Joshua in the UK in front of a big football stadium like that on a matchroom card on Sky Sports. You're obviously concerned about the officials. But when it comes to DAZN, things are a little bit worse, I think, in terms of corruption, because we've seen so many fights on DAZN, even fights of that magnitude that look so scripted and look so weird to me. And I don't know, man, going into this Usyk rematch, I'm really conflicted on it. The reason I haven't made a video on it yet is because of all the uncertainty, because we know what's been going on in the world right now. The Ukrainians are kind of a protected class at the moment, and the idea of Anthony Joshua getting a helping hand, it doesn't seem as much of a foregone conclusion as that one did, So I found that really weird, just the fact that the rematch is apparently confirmed now, and it's going to be in the Middle East. It's going to be on DAZN as part of AJ's new DAZN deal, and it just seems to me like everything's set up nicely and conveniently for Anthony Joshua, isn't it? Despite the fact he's the underdog, and despite the fact he's obviously the challenger, it makes the whole situation in boxing weird, doesn't it? Like fights are usually easy to predict of this magnitude because you know who's better. But obviously, if you've seen one guy win already, but going into the rematch, man, it adds a certain amount of unpredictability to it. At least that's the way I see it, And what else was it? What else was it? Lee said he said something about that fight that just kind of stuck in my mind. I watched the video a few days ago, and yeah, I haven't really been able to get it out of my head since. But it really intrigued me. Oops, Mike was muted then. Yeah, sometimes forget when I do that. Hey, what's up, Vector04? Not seen you in a while. How's it going, man? God bless. Yeah, I was just talking about obviously the documentary, but I was also talking about Usyk versus AJ, because apparently that's confirmed now. And yeah, it's going to be in the Middle East. And I was talking about how basically the new DAZN deal that Usyk has just signed, or that AJ has just signed, makes that one very strange to me, because apparently they've made a massive deal with Anthony Joshua where they're going to be broadcasting all his fights for the foreseeable future, and there's hundreds of millions of dollars on the line. And yeah, it really makes this Usyk rematch interesting, because a lot of people are favouring Usyk, including myself. But if he defeats AJ in this first fight on that new deal, I don't know, man. It's really strange to me. Like, it seems as if there's going to be a concerted effort not to allow that to happen. You know? Yeah. So it is official. Well, mate. Yeah, good to see. Yeah, that's good, mate. Yeah, I found it strange too that they will do as much as they can to make Usyk not win. Yeah, that's just the way I see it, man. I think that's just the feeling I've got going into this fight. Like, DAZN, I know DAZN are known for just pissing money away, throwing money down the drain, but to put that amount of money invested in Anthony Joshua in a fight he could very, very easily lose, and a fight he most likely will lose as long as it's on the level, it just seems like a crazy business decision, even for a company like DAZN. I don't think DAZN are that crazy that they would waste that much money. So again, it makes this rematch so weird, and the fact that it's taking place in the Middle East too, where we know there's just crazy amounts of money being thrown around. And I know that the Saudis, they invest a lot of money in these fights, not expecting to get any back. Like, they're not expecting to get any sort of return on the money that they put up for these fights. I mean, the money they put up to have the likes of Callum Smith and George Groves. Obviously the money they were going to put up for Gassiev versus Usyk, and of course the money they put up for the likes of Amir Khan fighting there, and AJ and Ruiz and whatnot. It's not as if those fights are big over in the Middle East. It's not as if they're going to do a lot of ticket sales or anything that's going to recuperate some of that money. So I just think that whenever you got a fight in that part of the world, and a fight of this magnitude with this much money on the line, it's hard to really imagine it being legitimate, if you know what I mean. It's hard to imagine it being on the line and without there being any skullduggery. It's just a weird situation, man. It really is. AJ shook. He tried to get Usyk to not look first, but failed. Is that what happened at the face-off? I didn't watch it, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, just the announcement of it was what really kind of knocked me for six, if you know what I mean. Like, the fact it's going to be in Saudi Arabia and there's that much money on the line. I would have thought for AJ, they would have wanted to have it in the UK again, and maybe just take the fight as a challenger, if you know what I mean, without all this, have a bit of stability, if you know what I mean. And going into the Middle East, where he's not really going to have a whole lot of support, it's support that really could, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a support that could really motivate him to fight the way he needs to fight to win. Because when AJ fought Ruiz in the Middle East, there wasn't much of a crowd there, and it was unfamiliar territory, and he was very defensive, very negative in the fight, and that works against a guy like Ruiz. But if he were to fight like that against Usyk, if AJ can't really get up for it, he's not going to win the fight, is he? He's gonna get completely schooled. I mean, he can't outbox Usyk the way he outboxed Ruiz. It's not going to happen, is it? Right? It's physically impossible. unless Usyk just doesn't come to fight, which is really making me wonder. That surely they wouldn't invest that much money. I know Anthony Joshua's a star, but he's not that big a star, right? They're not going to invest that much money in him and then have him potentially lose the first fight on his new contract. That's just what concerns me about it, man. And it was, like I said, it was watching Lee's video that really made me think, because I wasn't really thinking about it like that until I heard his video, and he made a lot of really good points. He was basically insinuating, look, what is Usyk going to have to do to win this? Because with all the money that's on the line, it's just so weird, man. Yeah, got off it right now. Guys, if the fight is fixed or rigged, we need to boycott all future Matchroom fights. Yeah, I mean, look, Matchroom, as far as I'm concerned, they are extremely shady because they've got a long history of this sort of thing, a long history of setting up rematches, and they just don't look the same. Ruiz beats AJ, and then in the rematch, he comes in even more out of shape than usual and doesn't apply any pressure and just doesn't look as if he's there to win. A similar sort of thing happened with Dillian Whyte and Povetkin. Povetkin knocks Dillian Whyte out cold. Povetkin looks really, really motivated and determined in the first fight, despite being so faded. And he was willing to do what he needed to get the win. He was willing to try as hard as possible. But then in the rematch, it was like a different guy. He shows up to the rematch. It's in some dodgy, like, neutral location. And it just has that air of inevitability about it, doesn't it? Where you just know what the result's going to be. I don't know. I've gotten quite good at predicting these sort of outcomes in fights like this. Like I picked Usyk to win the first fight, despite my reservations about the scoring and the judges and the referee and whatnot. But with this fight, I'm not so confident. I'm not so confident because of what's been going on. It's really giving me mixed feelings, man. It really is. What did you think of the documentary, mate? I missed it. I haven't been able to watch it. Yeah, I was talking about that at the beginning of the stream. It really intrigued me because, boxing documentaries, like I was saying earlier, I don't usually pay much attention to them because I think usually they're very scripted and usually they just don't really have a point to them. I think they're just filled with useless information. I'm just the type of guy where when it's a fighter, I like to just watch the fight and all the stuff in between, like the 24/7s and the build-ups. I'm not a big fan of them. And usually when I was saying this earlier, when fighters have bad performances, they usually before the fight they'll say they're in great shape, they've made the weight well, they've eaten right, and they feel strong, they feel fit, they're raring to go. And then afterwards, it's a different story. I had an injury, I had problems making weight, this, that, I wasn't motivated, whatever. Forgot the fight was coming up, volcanoes, whatever. And but with the Josh Taylor situation, I've suspected for a while that something wasn't right in the build-up to that fight. And what surprised me about this documentary is they actually documented, because I'm assuming they planned to make the documentary long before the fight. They pretty much documented that entire training camp. I'm talking about prior to the Catterall fight. They pretty much documented the whole thing, all the sparring, all the days, months and months out from the fight, trying to make weight. Before it first got cancelled, they show Josh getting his ass kicked in sparring. They show him absolutely exhausted after just a few rounds on the bag. They show him having problems with his knee. And it's as if the whole thing was well documented. And you just see him, he's trying to skip in the gym and he can't skip. And he's swearing and kicking the floor and all that. He was just so pissed off the whole training camp. And then it really makes you think, what were they doing? What was Ben Davison doing, having Josh still fight at 140? And, he just looked he looked dead on the day before the fight. Like I said, they documented the whole thing. And on the day of the weigh-in, it was really telling, man. It was like, it really goes to show you when you're at that age and when you're trying to force yourself into a division that you don't belong in, and you're just out of your depth. And that's what it seemed like to me. The documentary was really interesting. I'd recommend it. Really, most boxing documentaries, like I said, I don't usually give a shit about them, but that one actually did surprise me. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. He didn't win the Ruiz rematch. That one was obviously fixed. Well, I mean, that's what I was saying. Ruiz didn't train. Clearly, he did, because if he did train, he would have at least been able to move a bit in the ring. But in that fight, Ruiz barely even moved. At least in the first fight, he took his time. Yeah, he didn't go like all out, but he took his time. He applied educated pressure. He worked the body, used his jab. He set up AJ for counters. When AJ squared up in front of him, Ruiz would drop the right hand on him or the left hook, and he would do something. But in the rematch, it was like Ruiz had no game plan whatsoever. It's like, did he really expect AJ to just stand in front of him and square up like he did the first fight? You would think Ruiz would have thought, you know what, I'm going to have to chase him in the second fight. He's going to try and box me. He's going to be cautious. And I'm going to have to put it on him early and take him out his comfort zone. But Ruiz never did that, right? There was no pressure from Ruiz. He wasn't trying to give AJ sort of flashbacks to the first fight. It seemed as if he was just there to survive and get a paycheck. And that's making me concerned about the Usyk fight, because it was a similar situation. It was a rematch of a fight he lost and lost badly. It was in the Middle East, and it seemed as if there was some sort of skullduggery afoot. And that's what it's making me think about going into this rematch. I honestly don't think, at least how I feel right now, this might change as the fight gets closer, but how I feel right now, I don't think we're going to see the same Usyk. I think it's going to be a different Usyk. I really do. That's as much as I'll say, What part looked fixed? Ruiz was out of shape. Yeah, but again, that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? About us saying that it could be fixed. The fact that he was so out of shape in the biggest fight of his career. I mean, he won the first fight. Presumably, he would want to perform even better in the rematch to open up more opportunities for himself. He could become undisputed against Wilder. He could have done this. He could have done that. He could have had a big fight in Mexico as champion, but it's like Ruiz just wasn't up for it. He wasn't motivated for whatever reason, and it makes you wonder: did he know his role? Did he read the script? Because he didn't read the script going into the first fight, obviously. But did he read the script going into the rematch? Because it was in Saudi Arabia, because there was all this money put in front of him, and because the boxing establishment had so much riding on a Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury fight, was there so much of an incentive for Ruiz to just not try that he didn't try? That's the point I'm trying to make, because that's what's making me concerned going into the Usyk AJ rematch. I feel as if we're not going to see the same Usyk. That's the point I was wanting to make. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like we're not going to see the same Usyk. We're not going to see that same motivation. We're not going to see that same drive. It just seems to me like it's history repeating itself, and that tends to happen in boxing. You see a lot of these situations come one after the other. Yeah, that's what I was saying. That could have been part of the fix. Honestly, it was like Povetkin got drugged before going to the ring, wobbling all around the ring before even getting punched. Yeah, he didn't look right. His legs looked flipping weak. He looked flipping out of shape. He looked off balance. Looked as if he just wasn't himself. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't the same Povetkin, just like it wasn't the same Andy Ruiz. You didn't get the same guy in that rematch, did you? That's what that's what concerns me, man. It really, really concerns me. Something was off with Povetkin that day. Yeah, it definitely was. It wasn't the same Povetkin. And, boxing fans often get offended when you bring things like this up, and when you say a fight could have been fixed, or you say that there could have at least been something behind the scenes that led to a particular outcome. And it's as if they're so invested. I don't know whether it's financial investment or whether it's emotional investment, but for whatever reason, they're always so invested on a particular fight being real. They don't want to even conceive of the idea that a fight could be scripted. And I don't understand that mentality, because it's not as if fight fixing is completely unheard of. It happens. It has happened. So yeah, I don't get that at all. Josh Taylor went on a 3-month bender after he beat Ramirez. He gained a lot of weight and just lost focus. That must have played an effect on him. But I hope we see a motivated Taylor next. Yeah, and that's what's concerning me too, because with what I've been hearing on the build-up to when that documentary came out, Taylor's now saying that at least his next 2 fights are going to be at 140, which I find ridiculous, if I'm being honest. I mean, because like I was saying, what that documentary kind of documented from like the early part of the training camp against Catterall was that the weight making was a serious issue. And what I noticed was that when you look at the clips of him sparring and the clips of him trying to skip, and look, skipping's easy if you're an athlete in good shape, but he wasn't even coordinated enough to skip. And in sparring, he was getting his arse kicked. Like, he looked terrible. And this is on the build-up to the fight. This is like weeks and weeks away from the fight. So it just makes me think that at this point in time, he can't make the weight, or at least he can't make it and perform to the best of his ability. So that's another one I'm concerned about. I'm actually thinking there's probably a very good chance he might lose his next fight. Well, I think there's a very good chance of it, especially with what I saw in that documentary, because it seemed genuine enough to me. It didn't seem like one of these, HBO 24/7s or Showtime All Access or whatever you call them, these scripted nonsense documentaries. It seemed like a very, very honest and very local type of documentary, if you know what I mean. Like it was all very, very behind the scenes stuff. It didn't seem as scripted to me as your average boxing documentary. And there was no nonsense. Everything in it was relevant. Why is Taylor still at 140 when he should move up? That's what I don't understand. I don't understand what is motivating him to stay at 140. I mean, people are saying he wants to fight Catterall again because of all the people that have been slagging him off. He wants to prove them wrong or whatever. But there's absolutely no reason for that as far as I'm concerned. Because again, boxing fans are very fickle. They're fair weather fans. They will. What they will do is they'll be reactionary, right? I've talked about this before, when a fighter looks bad, when they get dropped, they have a tough fight, everybody jumps off the bandwagon. Next fight, they look great, and then everybody starts jumping on their dick again. And it's like boxing fans don't really have a consistent standard. I have a consistent standard, and I'm not saying I'm perfect or anything, but what I do have is I have a consistent standard that doesn't change easily. My opinion on certain fighters doesn't necessarily change after just one fight, or even after a few fights. It doesn't change. I still pretty much hold the same standard, and I think it's important that it actually helps with predicting fights too. I mean, when George Kambosos got that win over Teofimo Lopez, everyone started jumping on his dick, saying he's the well, not everybody, but a lot of people were saying he was the best lightweight. Well, what was I saying? I never said he was the best lightweight. I never rated Teofimo. To me, Teofimo Lopez was one of the biggest hype jobs, one of the biggest frauds in boxing. And because I'm not like a lot of these other boxing fans who put their head in the sand, put their fingers in their ears, and refuse to even conceive of the idea that a fight could be fixed, I wasn't giving him a lot of credit for the Lomachenko fight because I don't believe it was a real fight. And that paid off. I told you guys he was never going to go anywhere at world level. Teofimo Lopez is going to get completely exposed, and his entire legacy is going to be built on a fake victory over Lomachenko. That's all he's ever going to amount to. He's never really going to do anything else. We're never really going to hear about him at elite level, and that's exactly what happened. And a lot of people who were calling him the number one lightweight, they now are back to square one, and they've just made a complete arse of themselves. So it's important to have a consistent standard in boxing. I wonder why Usyk didn't KO Joshua. He definitely could have. Did he want to make sure that they have a rematch for another easy payday, or was it contractually agreed? I don't think we have seen Usyk 100%. It did look to me like Usyk could have got AJ out of there, but at the same time, Usyk didn't want to overexert himself because he's fighting a much bigger man, a much bigger puncher, and a guy who's dangerous, right? Who's always going to be dangerous, even if you're a better fighter, just by virtue of the fact that he's bigger and stronger. So I think it made sense in the first fight for Usyk to just be careful and just win the fight on the cards. I know that the judging was a concern, but what's also a concern, and let's not forget Usyk did take a bit of a beating. He had a cut. In fact, I think he had a few cuts and he was swollen up. So if he overexerted himself a bit, what could have happened is he could have walked onto a big shot, and walking onto a big shot could have given a stupid referee who maybe has a bit of sway with the judges. Like, I don't know, they could overreact to things that Usyk did, or overreact to things that AJ did and kind of placate to the judges, and that could get AJ the round. Or the referee could jump in and wave the fight off. You never know, he could wave the fight off prematurely. We've seen a lot of British fighters bailed out like that over the years. So I think that Usyk understood that it was probably wise for him to just take his time and not go all out in that fight. You know, I think his strategy worked. It was risky, but it worked. Zepeda could knock him out. Punches hard and is a southpaw. Taylor don't do well against them. Also, the fact that the weight cut won't be great. Yeah, I agree. I definitely think Zepeda has a great chance in that fight. I think a fully healthy, in shape, motivated Taylor, like the Taylor we saw against, say, Ramirez or Baranchyk, you know, when he had a little bit more professionalism and stability, he probably would have won that fight by decision. But right now, going into it, it doesn't look good, especially after what I saw from that documentary. I saw a guy who is really, really in a bad way, if you know what I mean. I don't think Taylor is healthy. I really don't. I don't think he's healthy mentally or physically. I think the guy's extremely uptight. I think the guy's got anger issues. I really do. And I think that really is being made worse by the fact that he's starving himself to make weight. You know, we've seen it before with fighters. Look at what happened to Ricky Hatton when he was blowing up in weight and then starving himself. You know, look at what happened to Alex Arthur. You know, a lot of these fighters end up with terrible punch resistance and poor stamina, you know, and it's because of the weight cut, in my opinion. So they need to be careful, man. They really do. That's what it is. I thought Zepeda should have gotten the nod over Ramirez. Yeah, a lot of people did. I think I watched that fight, and I think it was very, very close. To me, Zepeda could have won, Ramirez could have won. I think I just gave it to Ramirez, but I wouldn't argue with anybody who thought Zepeda won. It was sort of Zepeda's boxing versus Ramirez's aggression, and it was a good fight, man. It was interesting. But for me, I think I just gave it to Ramirez. But like I said, it was one of them fights that I wouldn't argue about either way, you know. Yeah, he edged that one. For some reason, they like to gift Ramirez fights. Yeah, you know, I mean, Ramirez was definitely the A side against Prograis and against Postal and against Zepeda. So, you know, that could be why he was the one who got the decision, you know. But I thought they were close fights, personally. Zepeda is dangerous, but I think Josh will be ready for him. He knows that he has to take that one seriously. Well, I hope so. I hope he knows. But what's concerning me is what I'm hearing from Josh is he's talking about Jack Catterall. He doesn't even seem remotely concerned by Ramirez, and I think by Zepeda. And I think Zepeda's a better fighter than Jack Catterall. I think he's better in pretty much every way. He's maybe not as quick, maybe doesn't spoil as good, but he's a better boxer. He's got better skills, better defense, punches a lot harder. That's a hard fight, man. Especially if you're struggling with the weight, you know. I think AJ loses again. This isn't like the Ruiz fight where AJ made a tactical error. Usyk picked him apart. Yeah, technically Usyk was the superior fighter. Usyk was the better athlete. Usyk was just more skilled. And yeah, it was a one-sided schooling basically. But the concerns I have is that there's a lot of money that's recently just been invested in Anthony Joshua with the zone and the fights in the Middle East. And I don't know, man. Call me a cynic, but I think people are going to be surprised. I think something's going to go wrong with that fight. I really do. I don't think we're going to see the same Usyk. I really do think it's going to be different. Something's going to be different about it. AJ is going to sleep this time. There's fear in his eyes. It could happen. Look, if this is a totally legit fight, Usyk could win by stoppage. He could win by another wide decision. But something nagging in the back of my mind says it won't happen. Going into the first fight, I was confident Usyk would win. But I just wasn't sure if he would get the decision. But this fight, I'm not so confident. Call me a cynic. I think something strange is going to happen in this fight. We're not going to see the same Usyk. We're going to see a guy who's got a different mentality going into the fight. He's going to be less motivated to win, I think. That's just how I see it. Yeah, I hope so. Josh needs to change from Wasteman Davison. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Ben Davison as a trainer. Look, people think I hate Ben Davison. I don't mind him as a person. He seems like a nice guy. You know, he's a Christian. Like he seems like a good man. You know, he's a guy who is he gets along with these fighters, and he's like good at holding the pads. But as a trainer, as a tactician, as a motivator in the corner, the guy's completely out of his depth. He's too young. He's too inexperienced, and he's not doing anything for Taylor in the rematch, you know, if he fights Catterall again, or in the Zepeda fight. I think Taylor's going to need a trainer who's more calm and more experienced and can just give him the basic instructions that he needs to get the best out of him and to win the fight. You know, I don't think that Davison is the right trainer, but who am I to talk? You know, it is what it is. Yeah, Davison. How come everyone? Yeah, a lot of people don't like. I don't mind him as a person, but as a trainer, I just think he doesn't have the experience at this level. You know, he's been given these fighters due to his affiliations with the likes of Billy Joe Saunders and Tyson Fury, and I just think that man, he needs to get a bit more experience before he before he's trusted with guys like Josh Taylor. You know. I thought Josh could have gotten Ramirez out of there if he had a different trainer instructing him. Yeah, I felt as if I felt that watching the fight too. Davison was a little bit too hesitant, if you know what I meant, in the later rounds of that fight. He should have realized, look, we're away from home, and you know, you're going to need to stamp your authority in this fight, because Ramirez was weaker in the later rounds because of all the body shots he'd taken, and those two knockdowns took a lot out of him. Those were heavy knockdowns. Like, they weren't flash knockdowns; those were heavy knockdowns, and I think Taylor, if he'd stamped his authority on the fight a little bit more, I do think he could have gotten a stoppage. But at the same time, I could see the argument that don't want to walk onto anything big and maybe get dropped himself or get stopped, or give the referee a reason to stop it, or give the judges the reason to give Ramirez a gift. You know, he didn't want to. He didn't want to take that risk, but at the same time, it's like we were saying about Usyk earlier against AJ not going for the stoppage. It's a real risk, isn't it? Either way, you want to look at it. So I can see both sides of that argument, you know. But I do think that you've got a point, man. I really do. It is what it is. What do you think of Archie Sharp? About Archie Sharp, do you see him becoming world champ? I've not seen enough of him to say that he could become a world champ. Based on what I have seen and what I do know, I don't think so, but it could happen. I definitely need to look at him a little bit more and see. Made the fight closer than it needed to be. Yeah, he definitely did do that. It was very close on the scorecards, but it really wasn't a close fight. It shouldn't have been, you know. It was one-sided, yeah. The documentary here on YouTube. No, it was on BBC Scotland. And it's weird. You know what's weird about it? I don't have a TV license, but somehow I was able to watch it. Oops. But yeah, I actually plugged an aerial into my TV just so I could watch it. Yeah, it was on BBC Scotland. I don't know if it'll be uploaded to the internet at some point. I'm sure it'll be floating around somewhere. But man, it was an interesting documentary. Much more interesting documentary than I was expecting, you know. Because again, I'm not usually the type of guy who watches boxing documentaries, but that one, I found it a little bit eye-opening, and it confirmed a lot of the suspicions I've had about Josh Taylor for a while now, and the concerns I've had. And what do you make of Usyk AJ two-head winning? I was talking about this earlier. I've always felt Usyk is a better fighter than AJ. I've always felt that in a fair fight he wins. But there's something nagging in the back of my mind about this rematch that makes me think that it's not going to be entirely legit, and we might see a different sort of performance from Usyk to last time, you know. I don't know, man. I'm concerned about it. I had Josh winning, but he could have separated himself more if he stepped on the gas. Davison kept encouraging him to cruise. Those scorecards were tightening. I agree. It was definitely a calculated risk. In that case, it paid off. In another fight, on another night, it might not have, you know. It is what it is. but it's definitely a risk, man. Usyk doesn't strike me as a guy to throw a fight. He doesn't strike me as a guy to throw a fight either. He seems like a very stoic individual, but I've thought that before. I've thought that before about fighters. I didn't think Kovalev would be the type to throw a fight. I believe he did. I didn't think Lomachenko would be the type to throw a fight. I believe he did. Those are just my opinions, but I have reasons for believing it. And yeah, I've seen it before, man. I've been in this situation before where I've really believed in a guy and they haven't performed. I've really put a lot of stock into a fighter and they haven't performed on the night, man. Ruiz was able to capitalize on AJ's chin. Usyk is just an overall better boxer. Yeah, that's true. Ruiz wasn't winning the Joshua fight prior to when he got knocked down, and that was actually the worst thing that happened to AJ because he thought he had Ruiz, and he squared up and he got caught, and Ruiz put a beating on him and had him the rest of the fight. But you know, the writing was on the wall after that third round against Ruiz, but you know, because AJ never fully recovered from it, he needed several more rounds to recover from it. But the Usyk fight was different. That was a systematic schooling. Usyk won almost every round, you know, of just boxing smart and being quicker and more skilled, you know. That's what it is. He was just a better fighter with better skills and better movement and everything. Josh Taylor should have a good performance against Zepeda. I think he has something to prove after the Catterall criticism. You see, I see what you're saying there, but there's a concern there, isn't there? Because having something to prove isn't always the best mentality for a fighter to have. What that can often do, and I've noticed this over the years of just experience of watching the sport, what that can often do is it can lead to you being a bit overzealous with your performance and maybe leaving it all in the gym, which is what I think Taylor did going into the first fight with Catterall. He wanted to prove himself to the crowd. But going into the Zepeda fight, I think his mind is going to be on the Catterall rematch, and he's really going to want to make a statement and take the guy out early. You do not want to have that mentality against a guy like Jose Zepeda. Look at what happened to Baranchyk. Went in there looking for a first round KO, thought he was too strong, thought he was too powerful, ended up in a war and got knocked out cold. Brutal knockout. Zepeda's got power. He's a patient counterpuncher. He reminds me of a guy like Juan Manuel Marquez. That's who Zepeda reminds me of. Not in terms of his fighting style, just in terms of his mentality in the ring. I'm just going to the bathroom, guys. But yeah, in terms of his mentality in the ring, he reminds me of a guy like Juan Manuel Marquez. You know, a calm, composed sniper in the ring, a counterpuncher, a guy who can get knocked down and not get into his feelings. You know, he can get knocked down and he can stay calm, not try to get his lip back and realise that it's a 12-round fight. And he's got 12 rounds to get the job done, you know. I'm itching to do a hedge bet for the stoppage either by either AJ or Usyk. The odds are close. Or simply AJ to win, hedge with Usyk by stoppage. Also, the odds are close. Well, it's up to you, man. But it's your money, you know. It's you taking the risk. I don't want to influence you either way, you know. Again, like The Wire says, from a complete stranger online. Remember, your opinion should be your own. Just consider my opinion to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Just saying that for legal reasons, you know. Davison went from boxer-sized coach to having to coach at the highest level. Where was I? It's not youth or inexperience, it's just lack of knowledge. I think it's a bit of both. I really do. If Davison had like years and years of training under his belt, you know, if he had the kind of experience that someone like Joe Gallagher or Billy Nelson or one of those guys, so some other British trainers, you know, Adam Booth, whoever, if he had a similar sort of experience as what those guys have had, I'm pretty sure he'd be a pretty good trainer. But I mean, the lack of experience, it's really telling with a guy like Ben Davison. You know, again, he's too young and he's too green. That's just how I see it. Yeah, Davison went from boxer-sized coach to having to coach at the highest level. And yeah, it's not even just about knowledge. a lot of it is about your temperament as a trainer. You have to be able to keep your calm, because fighters in the corner are going to have rough moments. They're going to have difficult moments where, they're going to need some. They're going to need some advice. They're going to need some clear and straight to the point instructions. And Ben Davison doesn't strike me as the type of trainer who can have that sort of mentality in the corner. That was something that was quite good about Adam Booth. I'm not a big fan of him, but he was very good when he was training the likes of George Groves and David Haye. He was very good at keeping them calm in the corner. And I think Shane McGuigan had that sort of mentality with Josh Taylor, but Ben Davison doesn't seem to have it, man. He just doesn't. Alright, sorry about that, guys. Just had to go on mute for a second. Where was I? Josh needs an American trainer. Fury didn't get good until he switched to Sugar Hill. Yeah, Sugar Hill, I definitely think, brought something new to the table for Fury. Because Fury was a very, very negative defensive fighter, but when he went with Sugar Hill Stewart, it definitely improved his punching technique, and he punches a lot harder, and he's a lot more accurate now. So again, it's not necessarily about a trainer being American. I think it's just about certain things that different trainers bring to the table that may or may not suit a certain fighter. Exactly my point. Taylor was away from home against a guy with a come-forward style. Can't cruise and expect the scorecards to go his way. Yeah, exactly, he can't. And it was a massive, massive calculated risk, I think. I think Ben Davison could have cost him the fight there. He could have cost him the decision. But obviously in this case, or in that case, it didn't happen. But it could have happened. I definitely see your point, man. And if I was in his corner, I know I'm not a trainer, so who am I to talk? But if I was in his corner, I would have given Josh Taylor a bit more urgency. I'd have told, look, you got to stamp your authority on this fight and you got to come forward a bit more because you're in America, got a tough Mexican in front of you, a guy who comes forward and the crowd are excited every time he throws a punch. So you're going to have to be a little bit more assertive, maybe not overly aggressive, but a little bit more assertive than this. That's what I would have probably told him, But then Davison didn't seem to want to, stamp his authority in the corner like that, Yeah, Davison was telling him to cruise. He definitely was, yeah. If I recall right, if it weren't for the knockdowns, that fight could have been scored a draw. Yeah, it was like 114, 112, something like that. It was a situation where if he didn't score both knockdowns, I think it would have been a draw. So yes, lucky he scored both knockdowns, How do you see Beterbiev at heavyweight? Well, Beterbiev's a big guy for light heavyweight, and I think he could probably do well in the cruiserweight division. And of course, he fought the likes of Usyk and several heavyweights as an amateur, but fighting at heavyweight as a pro is a little bit different. I think now he's kind of set in his ways at light heavyweight. I think he'd probably stay there for the time being. He's what, 37 now, something like that. He's something like 36, 37. So, he's been around a long time now, and he's just starting to get the big fights. So I think he's going to want to become undisputed because what else is he really going to do? He's not going to go up and like I said, I think he could do good at cruiserweight, but I don't see him campaigning there because he's not really going to get the big fights. So I think 175 makes more sense for Beterbiev at the moment. That Bivol fight, obviously once he gets Anthony Yard out the way, assuming that fight happens, but that Bivol fight's a great fight. That has to happen, man. I know two Russians fighting for undisputed. It's not going to sit well with everybody, but I mean that fight has to happen. Why? There's no logical reason why it shouldn't, man. I really want to see it. I think that's a great fight. I think Beterbiev looked great against Paul Smith. Could you imagine Beterbiev versus Paul Smith? Man, I'd watch that. But yeah, he looked great against Joe Smith, and we obviously saw what Bivol did to Joe Smith. He schooled him and won on points, but he didn't get him out of there like that. And I think Joe Smith improved a bit since that fight. So I don't know. Is Bivol going to fancy his chances against Beterbiev? That's not fighting a bum like Canelo. That's fighting an actual destroyer in the ring, man. That's a wrecking machine right there. But I want to see it, man. Right, if AJ just kept things long in the first Ruiz fight, he could have won on points. I agree. He could have won that fight on points if he was prepared for a hard 12-round fight and didn't fancy an early night. He could have won that fight on points, just like in the rematch, I think. But I still thought in the rematch he was there for the taking, and Ruiz just didn't capitalize on it. That's what it is. Ruiz just didn't come to win. If AJ beats Usyk, do you think the Fury fight will be made right away? Doubt it. They'll probably marinate it a little bit more and continue dangling the carrot in front of us. And who knows? It'll probably happen when they're both 40 years old or something, man. I don't know. I disagree. He hits harder than most heavyweights. Are you on about Beterbiev? I think he hits harder than most probably cruiserweights, but I don't know about most heavyweights. Weight classes exist for a reason, and Beterbiev has looked fantastic. He's looked fantastic at 175, but when you move up in weight, fight bigger guys, especially when you've been so set in your ways in a particular division, I don't know. I just don't see there being any options for him above light heavyweight. He's already got 3 of the belts, and if he gets that 4th belt, the WBA, off of Bivol, that's pretty much his career. That'll be his legacy right there. So I don't really see the point in him moving up in weight, man. I just don't see the point in it. I really don't, man. Greetings, Nordic. Shout out to I can't think of a good name, so this must suffice. That's a good name, man. I like it. Shout out to you. Good to see you here, man. God bless. Been on long, about 54 minutes. 54 minutes, 12 seconds, according to this clock. So yeah, I've been on quite a while. Yeah, we talked about a few things. We talked about Usyk AJ2. Talked about Josh Taylor's documentary, and a few other things. Beterbiev, we've been on for quite a while. It's flown by, man. It really has. Can he take the punches though, Beterbiev? Yeah, Beterbiev has been down. He's been down twice, so he could definitely go down at the higher weight division. I could see it. Perhaps Taylor should work with Hill. That's a good idea, man. Like Sugar Hill could probably really get the best out of Taylor's punching technique, teach him to punch harder and punch more correctly, and get back to the fundamentals. That's what he did for Tyson Fury. Got him back to the fundamentals. And the fundamentals of not only boxing, but punching. Punching through the target. Kind of like Emmanuel Stewart used to teach guys to do. And he really made him into a puncher. So if he can make a guy like Tyson Fury, who wasn't known as a puncher, into a puncher, he can definitely do the same for somebody like Josh Taylor. So that's a good idea, man. I would like to see it. I certainly would. Kovalev versus Beterbiev at cruiserweight. Well, I think that would still be a fun fight, but I think Kovalev's pretty shot now. I think Beterbiev knocks him out even at cruiser, but I'd still watch it. The two guys have got beef. Kovalev can still box. He's still got good power, so why not? It'd be a fun fight. I'd watch it. Shout out to Duck. Good to see you here, man. God bless. Every time. Stop. AJ has skill, but he's missing that it factor. I'm going for Usyk in the rematch because that's twice AJ lost to a guy he shouldn't have. If he lost to a Wilder or a Fury, that would be different. Personally, I think that I think Usyk's better than Wilder and Fury in terms of boxing skill. Obviously, doesn't punch as hard as both of them, but he definitely is a better boxer, and he does move better. He does box better. So I think that losing to Usyk, there's not any shame in it personally, but I see what you mean. A lot of people believe that AJ should have won because he's a much bigger man and he was the favourite going in. So I do see what you're saying in that sense. But I see what you mean about the it factor too. AJ just doesn't seem to have that fighting mentality that a guy like Usyk has, And sometimes that can make all the difference in a fight. It can be the difference between winning and losing. Really can, man. Yeah, Beterbiev by stoppage, I agree. Beterbiev would destroy Kovalev now. Yeah, Beterbiev definitely would. I only gave Kovalev a puncher's chance. I think a prime Kovalev could have beaten him, but right now I think I give Kovalev only a puncher's chance, and that's it. Balaram is the one blocking Beterbiev versus Bivol. Potentially, maybe, but at the same time, I think the Anthony Yarde mandatory situation has got to be dealt with, has got to be over and done with before he agrees to fight Bivol for undisputed. So let's just see what happens. I kind of wouldn't mind the Anthony Yarde fight. Just get that fight out of the way, knock Anthony Yarde out, put that guy in retirement, and then I'm just he'll knock out Anthony Yarde if it's a real fight. Let's be honest, even in the UK, man. But just get that fight out of the way. Bivol, if he has a mandatory, get that out of the way, and let's make that fight in Russia. I know what's going on over there. I don't care. Let's have that fight in Russia for the undisputed title, man. It'll be fun. I agree. Beterbiev is the best light heavyweight. However, he better fight Bivol in 1 or 2 years because he is on a decline. Well, yeah, he's in his late 30s, and I think as time goes on, eventually it's going to catch up with him. Eventually, he's going to have problems making weight, and yeah, you know, it's a fight that will suit him if it happens soon more so than it would Bivol. You know, at least that's how I see it. People get carried away with the moving up stuff. I guess maybe he could challenge Usyk at heavyweight, but Usyk is a cruiserweight anyway. Yeah. I mean, the more I think about it, look, I think that it's fine for a fighter to stay in a division if they can make the weight. Obviously, what I was saying about Josh Taylor earlier is he clearly can't make 140 without starving himself. Whereas Beterbiev, you know, even though he's older, even though he is big for the weight, he seems like more of a consummate professional who has his diet and nutrition under control. He seems to have his boxing career under control. He knows what weight suits him. He knows where he's most effective. And I think he's fine at light heavyweight right now. I've seen no indication that he should move up right now. I think Beterbiev should try and become undisputed. That's where his legacy is as a light heavyweight champion. And as the champion in that division, I don't see any point in him moving up. Unless he wants to. It is what it is. On a decline, he looks better than ever. Yeah, he does, but he definitely will be on a decline. I mean, he looks better than ever now, but, you know, boxing's a very hard sport. It takes a lot out of you, man. And man, it's hard making weight when you're in your late 30s, you know. Yeah, Beterbiev's the lineal champ. He just, if he wants to become undisputed, he has to see Dimitri Bivol. He's got the last piece of that puzzle. You know, yeah, it is what it is, man. I'd love to see it. Beterbiev versus Andre Ward. Arthur would have to KO him quick before he becomes infertile, yeah. Could you imagine that fight? Come on, Ward. Come on. Come out of retirement. You know you want to. Come on, you know there's a Eurobum here that needs sorting out. You know, come and fight him, Ward. Come on. What are you scared of? Come out of retirement. Just do it. Somebody needs to get on the phone to Andre Ward, man, and entice him to come out of retirement and take that fight, man. The boxing fans want to see you take out this Eurobum, you know? Come on, do it. What are you scared of, man? Do it. Ward wouldn't be able to wrestle Beterbiev. He is weaker than Artur. Yeah, Artur Beterbiev's strong, man, and he hits you with clubbing shots on the inside that rattle your brain. So, needless to say, I want to see him fight Andre Ward. Let's see it. Andre Ward, come on, fight that Eurobum. Let's see it. I actually picked Usyk to win by late KO in the first fight, so I'm sticking by that. In a real fight, logically that should happen, man. Oh. Sorry guys, I was trying to find my glass of water there. I didn't know where I put it. Beterbiev looked good in his last fight, but he's still nearly 40 years old. Beterbiev hasn't looked as good as he did against Vosdik in a while. He's also been dropped twice and 2 times in the last 2 years. Yeah, he's been dropped, so... But again, like, I'm not making a big deal out of the fact that he's been dropped, but he has been dropped. You know, it is always going to be there. It does show that there's at least a little bit of vulnerability there. But at the end of the day, so far he's gotten up and so far he's won. And so far he's won every fight by knockout. So that has to be taken into consideration too. But again, nobody's invincible. Anybody can be dropped. And at light heavyweight, they all punch. So it's what it is, man. Anybody can be in that situation. It's how you react to that situation that makes a fighter and proves how good you are and what you can handle. You know, can you fight through it? And can you come back to win? Yard getting 2 undeserved title shots because he's affiliated with Frank Warren and Warren's in bed with the WBO. Yeah, it's very well known. It's a very well known fact that Frank Warren has connections with the WBO. He has at very least a very good relationship with the WBO, and he has a history of getting fighters ranked despite not really fighting the competition that would get them in position to be ranked for a WBO title shot. And it didn't help Anthony Yard out, did it? Because he didn't have the experience of fighting tough domestic level opposition before he got in there with Kovalev, and he was completely out of his depth and he had no chance of winning. It was a domination by Kovalev. Yard had one good round. Other than that, he got dominated and he got brutally knocked out with a jab, man. And that might be one of their toughest fights. Ward gave Cove problems because of how he operated against Cove up close. Doing that to Beterbiev close would be a problem. Beterbiev, definitely a lot more physically strong and a lot fitter than Kovalev. He's got more stamina. And he hits harder in close. I think Kovalev was more dangerous at long range behind a jab and with a straight right hand. But Beterbiev in close range is grimy, man. He'll club you around the side of the head. He'll hit you with uppercuts. He's a hard man and a hard puncher, man. Ward headbutts would have Beterbiev bleeding more than Brown's. Yeah, Ward was the most skilled headbutter in the history of boxing, man. His punch resistance is lowering, but he hasn't declined sharply because he's still ahead of the current competition. Usyk is good, but he's overrated. Most of his skill were based on his size at cruiserweight. I don't think it was mostly based on size. It definitely played a part, but I mean, he wouldn't be beating the likes of Derek Chisora and Anthony Joshua if he didn't have skill against guys bigger than him, you know. But yeah, he definitely did have a size advantage against a lot of guys at cruiserweight, but he made the weight comfortably enough. And he still had great stamina. And he looks even better at heavyweight, man. But make Beterbiev Canelo, I want to see. yeah, make that fight, man. I'd watch it, why not? Off topic, you watched The Boys. Nope, never seen it. What's it about? I heard a few things about it actually, but I don't know much about it. I've never watched it. I think Beterbiev would have damaged Canelo. Oh, in a real fight, Canelo doesn't make it 5 rounds, in my opinion. He gets knocked out early. Indeed, Fox, Beterbiev would have ended Canelo's run at 160, above 160, likely damaged him beyond repair. Oh, of course he would have. Like, in a real fight, could you imagine Canelo doing all that stupid head movement stuff up on the ropes against Beterbiev? Beterbiev won't take a step back like Bivol did. Beterbiev will get up on his chest and smack him around that ring and beat him into submission. And Canelo, man, I want to see it. Let's see it. Beterbiev is still the best after watching his fight versus Smith. With Smith, it confirmed one thing. He would have destroyed B-Hop at light heavyweight. Yeah, B-Hop, especially when B-Hop was at light heavyweight, which was in his 40s, wouldn't have stood a chance. To me, Beterbiev's too strong, too powerful. He would have beaten the crap out of B-Hop. B-Hop would have had to spoil and cheat just to survive that fight, and I don't think he would have. I think he would have got stopped, probably in the later rounds. Or he'd find a way out, like jump out of the ring and quit. How Beterbiev dealt with a dirty fighter like Brown showed his character. The intentional headbutts made the beast wake up. Yeah, it did. You know, he showed a lot of stoicism in that fight. You know, he got cut after the clash of heads, and you know, he didn't really look fazed by it. Didn't look bothered. He just kind of was like, all right, and you know, I'm probably gonna have to get this guy out of here quicker now. And that's what he did. You know, he broke him down and he stopped him. Ward spent more time retired than actually boxing. The guys are joking. Yeah, Ward was always, my shoulder's injured. Something's happening with my promoter. Screw Andre Ward, man. Andre Ward was one of the biggest fraud in history of boxing. Absolute fraud, cheating coward, stain on the sport. And there's a reason hardly anyone talks about him anymore, because what's there to talk about? Oh, remember when he won the title against Kessler with 5 accidental headbutts? Remember when he beat Sakio Bika in Oakland by elbowing and clinching? You remember when he hit Kovalev in the nuts and used his nuts as a speed bag and was given a premature stoppage victory? Remember the gift decision he got after getting dominated and schooled by Kovalev? What a career, man. I mean, what a fascinating boxing career that guy had. What a memorable, incredible, Hall of Fame worthy roller coaster career Andre Ward had. I mean, wow, what a man, what a guy. Yeah, nobody wants to rewatch that, do they? You don't hear people talking about what a classic that Andre Ward fight was. You know, him beating Paul Smith. Wow, that was a classic. What's there to talk about? There's nothing to talk about with Andre Ward. He had a garbage career. At least I enjoy parts of his career because I'll always be thankful that he beat the piss out of Carl Froch. I can always watch that and enjoy it. But why would I ever want to watch any of Ward's other fights? Why? What was there to offer? What was there to offer? Absolutely nothing. That's my little rant for the day. Yeah, that's my rant for the day. You guys got to enjoy it. Gotta give Ward credit. He has incredible variety in cheating, and he can tie it all together seamlessly. Incredible. The most skilled cheater of all time. It's on season 3 now. It's supposed to be a parody for Superhero Law, but with a gritty spin on it. Interesting. Interesting. Might check it out and tell you guys what I think of it. True, Ward was a creative, dirty fighter. There was no dirty tactic he wasn't willing to use. Yeah, elbows, headbutts, holding, headlocks, shots behind the head, shots on the break. Very, very dirty fighter. You know, that's what it is, man. I don't know what to do about it. But I don't know what can be done. His fans don't care about it. After being whooped by Kovalev, Ward admitted the fights took a toll on his body. He wanted nothing to do with his IBF Mando, Beterbiev, obviously. Yeah, or his WBA Mando, Bivol. You know, he didn't want to have to deal with another Russian, you know, because either Russian was beating him, probably even by knockout, man. It's not often I agree with Carl Froch, but he was right that Ward didn't want to fight those guys. He definitely didn't want to fight Bivol, who was chasing him, you know. That's what it is, man. He was a coward and a cheater and a disgrace to the sport, who I'm glad he's retired. And he shouldn't be commentating either. He should go away and just repent, man, and you know, try and give something back to the sport, I guess. I don't know, man. I don't know what he can do, but he could probably try and teach people how to beat cheaters like himself. I don't know. Here's what it is. I wish Ward had taken on Stevenson before retiring. Well, he didn't want that fight either. He turned that fight down. Stevenson was maybe not the best fighter, but he was dangerous, and he was too dangerous for Ward. Long arms, you know, big long reach, a lot of power. Didn't want that fight. Too dangerous, man. So many Russians, Uzbek, Kazakh fighters dominate boxing, MMA in future. Yeah, it depends if they're allowed to compete. I mean, look at what they did with Povetkin. You know, they blacklisted him with fake drug tests to protect that bum Deontay Wilder. You know, they weren't ready to sacrifice Wilder yet. They sacrificed him to Tyson Fury eventually, but they didn't want a Russian to be the guy to expose him. And Russia's public enemy #1 nowadays. So who knows if they'll even be able to fight professionally for much longer? You know, could be similar to the Soviet Union and situations where they weren't allowed to compete, you know. And then we'll get another domestic American scene like back in the 70s and 80s, you know. And to a lesser extent, the 90s. Where was I? Imagine Beterbiev, Froch, the basic Froch, he wouldn't make the bell. No, Froch gets knocked out. He gets knocked out in 5 rounds. He never fought a puncher like that or a pressure fighter like that in his career, ever. I mean, little Arthur Abraham nearly knocked him out in the 12th round. What do you think Beterbiev does? He probably knocked him out in 5 rounds, in my opinion. That's why Froch ducked Adonis Stevenson when he was mandatory, because That was the first like elite level puncher he would have ever fought, and he would have gotten knocked out early, in my opinion. Is what it is. It's what would have happened. I think. That's true, but Usyk struggled with Chisora. Usyk only throws punches where he's comfortable. He won't be comfortable against Fury or Wilder. Fury, especially Wilder, to impose it. Yeah, he struggles with Chisora. That's what I kept hearing before the Usyk fight, and yeah, we know how that went. Yeah, man. Struggled with Chisora. A lot of people struggled with Chisora and came back better fighters afterwards because they learnt from it. Ward will impart his veteran tactics to the next generation. Yeah, he'll be teaching the likes of Marcus Brown and Devin Haney how to stink the joint out and win, you know. I rewatched half a dozen Bivol fights in the last few days. He's got no way to keep Beterbiev off him. His power is meek at 175, and he couldn't even put a dent into Smith. Beterbiev wins hands down. Yeah, he didn't put much of a dent into Smith. He just schooled him, and that's a concern because we saw how easily Beterbiev dealt with Smith, so I definitely make Beterbiev the favourite in that fight. But you never know, man. Bivol is still learning. He's still young, and he's still getting better each fight, and he could outbox him. You never know, but I definitely don't make him the favourite, but I'm not saying it's impossible. He could potentially win, given the right situation, man. He definitely could do it. Shout out to John McSmith. Good to see you here, man. God bless. Salute Nordic Warrior and boxing fans. Yep, absolutely, man. God bless. I like that more undisputed champions are happening in our time. Makes the belts mean something. It certainly does, but at the same time, when you see the likes of Devin Haney winning an undisputed title, it kind of makes the concept of undisputed seem a little bit less impressive. But I agree with you, though. It's good to see these guys unify, and we get a true champion in each division, man. Soviet countries have some good prospects, but I can't say I see any future fighters like Kovalev, Triple G, Loma, Usyk, Beterbiev, and the like. This generation was great. Yeah, I don't really see them. I mean, I haven't paid much attention to the current crop of Eastern European prospects, but I'm sure there's somebody there who could maybe get to near that level, but I definitely haven't seen anybody who is as good as the guys you mentioned, you know? So I definitely agree with you. Povetkin ducked Wilder. He would have got knocked out. Wilder's size makes him a dangerous fighter. Nah, I disagree. Wilder was a fraud. Povetkin would have knocked him out. It would have knocked him out late, in my opinion, after schooling every round. I could see Wilder tripping over his feet plenty against Usyk. Oh, Usyk could make Wilder fall all over the ring like Andre Durrell did when he fought Arthur Abraham, where he was just running around and jumping to the floor, falling all over the ring. That's what Usyk would have done to Wilder, in my opinion. He'd have him swinging and missing. He'd have him throwing himself off balance. You know, it is what it is, man. Bivol had Smith out on his feet at the end of the 12th. Yeah, right at the end of the round, he almost dropped him. That's true, but for most of the fight, Joe Smith was able to take his punches, but he wasn't able to take Beterbiev's punches. So that's a concern I think Bivol should have. I think Bivol should maybe look to win rounds. He definitely shouldn't try to trade with Beterbiev. That wouldn't end well for him, man. It definitely wouldn't. He'd need to be careful that whole fight, start to finish, and use his speed and his boxing IQ to win. I had Haney beating George 7-5. Most say he dominated, but I thought it was more from Haney letting George off the hook. I think I might have given George 1 or 2 rounds. I think I like 10-2 Haney, something like that. I didn't think it was close or competitive at all, personally. That's just how I saw it. Usyk can't beat Wilder. Wilder's too long. Usyk will be boxing until lights out. Just pay attention to how Fury beat Wilder and how he got a draw with him. You've got to take the fight to him to win. Well, Fury was in an absolute state in that fight, and he didn't really come to win. He just came to survive and spoil. But in the rematch, we saw what happened. He wasn't really concerned about Wilder's power at all, and he went in and took him out. Same as in the third fight. So, yeah, I don't rate Deontay Wilder. I think he's a fraud, man. Marciano versus Beterbiev. That's interesting because some similarities there. Marciano obviously fought at heavyweight, but that was back in the day when heavyweights were generally a lot smaller. And if he were around today, he could fight at light heavyweight or cruiserweight. So that's a great fight, man. That's hard. Obviously, Beterbiev is obviously more of an athlete. He's a modern day athlete, but Marciano was special. That guy had crazy punching power and a great chin and an amazing amount of heart and underrated skill too and great stamina. So I'd probably favour him by knockout. So yeah, I'd go with Marciano. Maybe come from behind, late knockout. That's how I see it. Marciano was a fighting man. He was. Prime Povetkin was a deadly matchup for Wilder. Yeah, definitely. He definitely was. I think Prime Povetkin would have won by knockout. Wilder versus Stavern 3. Yeah, let's see it. Let's see the trilogy, man. Maybe a Wilder Ortiz 3 too. Why not, eh? Why not? Usyk makes Wilder look like a bum and absolutely pummels him. Yeah, of course he does. He schools him every round. Probably stops him late, man. Couldn't even be bothered to finish Haney Kambosos. Fell asleep after 6 or so rounds. Yeah, it was boring, man. I struggled to get through it myself. I was only kind of half watching it and half browsing my computer. It was so boring, man. Get used to it, though. Get used to Devin Haney being in boring title defenses. That's the rest of Devin Haney's career, unless someone beats him. This is the first time in all these years watching Beterbiev that people are finally talking about his boxing skills. He's not just a slugger, swarmer. He's a beastly boxer, puncher, and he can do it all. I agree. He's a very technically good fighter. His punching technique, his balance, his technical know-how in terms of knowing what works against different opponents. Like against Joe Smith, he wasn't just going right at him. You'll notice in the first round, he was taking his time. And he was waiting for his opportunities. He let Joe Smith be the aggressor. He let Joe Smith go after him, and he let Joe Smith think he was the bigger, tougher guy. And he walked him into counter punches, and he set them up beautifully, man. And when he fought Marcus Brown, it was more educated pressure, and he broke him down gradually. He's a great fighter, man, and he's going to be tough to beat, man. He really is going to be tough to beat recently. Unless he just gets old overnight, he's going to be tough to beat, man. It really is. Usyk can beat Fury. I think he can. I don't know if he would, but I think he can. He's definitely got the boxing skills and the athleticism to do it. Y'all can't be serious. Usyk isn't that good. AJ was just overrated or never that good, which makes fighters like Usyk and Ruiz look like world beaters. Well, I always rated Usyk before he was ever set to fight AJ. The way that I look at Usyk, how good I believe he is, it had nothing to do with him beating AJ. I've been supporting Usyk for years. I've always thought he was a great fighter, and I always thought he could beat AJ. He's a great fighter. He really is. People should have known about that Beterbiev since the amateur days, where he delivered great fights with Usyk, and in the Vosdik fight, his technical prowess was very apparent too. Yeah. I thought Vosdik had a good chance of beating him. I did, but when I saw that fight, I was like, or when I saw the result, because I didn't watch it live. Like when I saw the result, I was like, man, Beterbiev's going to be hard to beat. He really is, because a guy like Vosdik is tough. He's strong. He hits hard. We saw what he did to Adonis. We saw what he did to the likes of Chilemba. That guy was a dangerous fighter, and Beterbiev just walked right through him, walked him down, man. Dangerous fighter. He really is. I just want Loma back. Yeah, Loma's a shill these days. I think. I don't think he's really gonna do much else in the sport. Not anything. Not anything significant. I think Prime Povetkin knocks out Usyk and AJ. Only Vlad and Vitaly beat him. I think. He's going to stop Wilder, but he can't stop Chisora or AJ. Are we talking boxing or imagination land? Well, Chisora and AJ are both better fighters in every way, shape, and form than Wilder. Wilder's one of the biggest bums in the history of boxing, and that's not me trying to be funny. That's just a fact. Wilder has zero boxing skill, Doesn't hit as hard as advertised. He's got a good straight right hand, but that's it. Can't throw a hook to save his life. Doesn't even know what an uppercut is. Doesn't have any defense. It would be target practice for a guy like AJ fighting Wilder. AJ knocks him out early. And Chisora would just get inside, rough him up, and walk him down. Chisora would probably beat Wilder. Probably even now. Wilder's really that bad. He is. People don't understand what went on with Wilder's career. They don't understand that guys were just laying down for him. They're just standing right in front of him, taking a right hand and going down like a sack of spuds. Wilder was the biggest fraud in the history of boxing, in my opinion. I just don't rate him, man. I really don't. That's how I see it. He's just a fraud, man. He really is. My grandmother has better technique than Wilder, and she's dead. Yeah, Wilder is awful, man. He really is. No, I'd pick Usyk over Povetkin. Size wouldn't be a factor, and I think Usyk's a better boxer. Yeah, I give Povetkin a good chance if he could land like a big hook or a right hand, but I think Usyk would get into a rhythm in that fight. I think he'd probably outbox him, probably win on points. It would be similar to the Marco Huck fight, except Usyk has much more volume and much more stamina than a guy like Marco Huck. He'd outwork Povetkin and he'd win, I think. It would be a good fight. It would be competitive. Thoughts on Jose Pedraza versus Richard Comey, announced for 8:27. I think Pedraza should school Comey. Comey's tough. He can punch a bit, but never really been that impressed with him boxing skill-wise. I think Pedraza is a very good boxer, and I think he'll completely school him and win a wide points decision. I don't think he'll stop him. He could, but I don't think that's very likely. I think it's a wide points decision for Pedraza. I think he wins it easily. That Otto Wallin fight with Fury is very telling. If you've seen that fight, yeah, that was a poor performance from Fury, and a good slip southpaw with just a good boxing fundamentals gave him a lot of problems in that fight. Vosdik put up a great effort, to be fair. Yeah, he did, but he got walked down. He wasn't physically durable enough to handle the pressure, but very few are. Nobody's been able to handle the pressure from Beterbiev. He's never been the distance as a professional, so that man is tough and he's dangerous. He's difficult to get through a fight against. Difficult to stand there with and trade. Whoever beats him is going to have to be smart and outbox him over 12 rounds. I think Bivol could do it. I don't know if he will. Wouldn't make him the favourite to do it, but I think he could do it. Who should Wilder fight next? Probably Charles Martin or one of those guys, maybe Adam Karnatsky. That's more his level, I think. I'm not even sure if he wins those fights. I think those guys could beat him. I really do. Did Beterbiev ruin Vosdik? He's easily good enough to compete with anyone in the division. Yeah, Vosdik retired after the fight, so yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. I think part of it was what he did to Adonis, putting him in the hospital and then getting hospitalised himself. It kind of freaked him out a bit, and he decided to hang up the gloves for good, it seems. Seems like it. That's not saying much. The old Povetkin gets knocked out by Wilder. AJ is worse than Fury. And Wilder's the hardest puncher pound for pound. He literally puts... Well, no, Wilder doesn't have much power. He just had so many fixed fights, guys just laying down for him. I mean, he hits hard with a straight right hand, but that's all he's got, at world level. This is what it is, man. But yeah, Wilder wouldn't even beat Ruiz. Even if Ruiz got all burrito beat on us again, yeah. Ruiz probably walks him down and stops him. Wilder's a protected Shavers, yeah. Way more protected. So he just had guys laying down for him, man. I don't think those fights were real. I really don't. Was the Wallin fight where Fury got that nasty cut? Anyone else in the ref would have stopped that fight, yeah. He was cut badly midway through that fight, and yeah, because it's Tyson Fury and because he was obviously the A side, he got a lot of leeway for that situation with the referee. The referee let him off the hook there. If anyone else would have been stopped that night, but Fury was the A side, and Fury was the guy who they had plans for. They already had the Wilder trilogy planned, so they weren't going to jeopardize it for anything. They let him get the cut and still win. Yeah, yes, Vosdick retired, and I wouldn't be surprised if Beterbiev retired Joe Smith too. Well, Joe Smith's overachieved in boxing. Good, tough, working class guy, but was never world class. He really got gifted the title, didn't he? Based on what most people think, against Maxim Vlasov, the other Russian. So he went as pretty much as far as he could go. He got his title shot. He won. And he should call it a day, or unless he wants to just become a gatekeeper, or he can move up to cruiserweight and give it a go because he's big for the weight. So maybe he'll be a bit more durable there. I don't know, man. I don't know where Joe Smith goes from here. It was a bad defeat. It was a one-sided defeat, and it's the type of defeat that not all fighters come back from. But we'll see how tough he is. We'll see what he's made of. Maybe he will come back from it, and maybe he is better than that. Maybe it was just a poor performance. We'll see, man. But I think he might call it a day. You never know. It's up to him. He could, like I said, he could still become a gatekeeper in the division. And there's some winnable fights for him out there. Just depends if he has the motivation for it. Bivol versus Vosdick. I would probably favour Vosdick in that fight, stylistically. I think he was a little bit more athletic, a little bit more powerful. Similar fighters, but I think Vosdick was just a little bit better. And I think he wins it. Just a little bit better. Maybe we are talking Prime Povetkin. But we're talking Prime Povetkin. Yeah, Prime Povetkin knocks Wilder out easy. Knocks him out easy. Pretty sure a no-leg amputee would outbox Wilder. Yeah, they probably have better balance than Wilder, hopping all over the ring. That was Fury prior to Sugar Hill, plus Wallin, a real heavyweight and bigger than Usyk. Modern-day boxing fans are ridiculous. I disagree. As long as Ruiz is not with Eddie Reynoso, then he'll have good performances, because after linking with the Canelo camp, he looked awful. That's because he's training with Canelo, and Canelo's a fraud, so if you're going to be training around a fraud, you're going to fight like a fraud. You need to surround yourself with real fighters, real talent, real winners. Matchroom or BS, putting Povetkin in with White rematch. Povetkin had just recovered from COVID at that time. Yeah, he had. He didn't look the same. That's the point I'm making. Yeah, he just didn't look like the same guy. And I've got a sneaking suspicion that we're going to see something similar with Usyk. That's just how I feel right now. It's a gut feeling I've got. What do you think of Wilder's budding music career? I got no idea. I didn't even know Wilder had a music career, to be honest. I don't know. We'll wait and see how his record sales go. Anyway, guys, it's late. I'm getting pretty tired. My voice is starting to go, and I'm gonna call it a night. I'm gonna chill out. I'm gonna try and go to bed because I'm really tired, man. I just figured before I'd jump on here. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. I know this was later than my usual live stream, so didn't have as many people and as many regulars in. So it is what it is, man. Just wanted to give some thoughts. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks to everybody who lasted through to the end. And yeah, have a good night, guys. God bless.